this is a huge health play for Google, definitely.
That unique data that you're bringing to the table is a very big strategic component of eventually unlocking a developer platform to let people build apps or services.
Another tech monopoly on the rise here. Google acquires Fitbit, $2.1 billion. This has kind of been in the rumor mill the past few days. And I mean, this is clearly Google's approach to try to rival the Apple Watch and what they're doing with Apple Health. This is a big health play on Google's part. I mean,
Google's also done a lot of stuff with more what I would call medical grade wearables with Verily as well in terms of clinical trials. I could definitely see some benefits in terms of hardware production and going from basically what is essentially prototype hardware to being able to produce those at scale using the Fitbit supply chain and some of the hardware capabilities they have there. So I think that this is a huge health play for Google, definitely. And it fits into Verily as well as broader Google Health and the consumer side of it and the things they want to do there.
And so, Google has this thing called Wear OS. So it's kind of interesting in the approach of Google's wrestled with this for years, which is, do we just purely provide the operating system and enable the OEMs, the smartphone manufacturers with Android, or do we need to have a more integrated approach like Apple, where we both own and create the hardware much more closely along with the software?
Right.
And they bought Motorola, and it didn't work. It didn't work. Now they're still doing the Pixel.
Yep. I think part of what you've seen is hardware makers becoming less or more wary of not owning the operating system. So Samsung has moved toward, they still obviously do Android devices, but trying to push stuff like wearables and smart TVs onto their own operating system, which they call Tizen. So that there's challenges in that most device makers, especially in a new category, aren't going to by default say, hey, let's just do Android, because they've seen that not work well in other categories. So I think that them needing to get their own device and make an acquisition here in that context makes a little more sense. This is a different landscape than when the iPhone launched, and basically all the OEMs and telecom companies were terrified of what AT&T and Apple were going to do to take over the world, and they needed an answer. And Android kind of parachuted in and solved all those problems. And it's a different circumstances now, and some of their partners back then have learned from their mistakes and giving up too much power. And that means that this acquisition, it makes sense. They needed to do it if they were going to compete with things like the Apple Watch.
Well, and it gives them, and why is the Apple Watch so important in the world of health? Well, it gives you user generated data constantly, just passive data about these individuals. And now you're seeing all of these different healthcare apps that it can be created based upon that data. And I mean, it's a big driver, right? When you can bring this unique data to the electronic medical record, and you can now pair that up with, Apple Health is also now making deals with Allscripts and other EMR companies. How can you put these two things closely together? That unique data that you're bringing to the table is a very big strategic component of eventually unlocking a developer platform to let people build apps or services based on the data that an Apple or Google has about your health, right? Interesting thing here at the end of this article is at the end of 2018, Apple owned about half of the global smartwatch market in terms of units shipped. Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.